You have 30 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't expose every single one of you for what you really are. I stood there holding the microphone, looking out at faces that had tormented me for years, watching them squirm in their expensive seats. The same people who thought it would be hilarious to watch the poor girl from Trenchtown humiliate herself were now begging me not to reveal their secrets on live television. You know what they say about karma. Sometimes it takes years to come around, but when it does, it hits harder than a hurricane. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up being the ones who give you exactly what you need to soar. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has a sense of humor about justice. Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Maybe you're watching this from your cozy living room, or perhaps you're on your lunch break trying to escape the day for a few minutes. How's the weather treating you today? I hope it's better than those stormy Kingston afternoons that used to soak right through my worn-out school shoes. My name is Raya Blanche, and this is the story of how I went from being the girl everyone expected to fail spectacularly on stage to standing in front of millions, holding a Grammy Award that proved every single one of them wrong. This is about the moment when their cruel joke became my greatest gift, when their laughter turned to silence, and when I discovered that my mother's legacy was far more powerful than any of us ever imagined. But before we get to that magical moment when everything changed, before I tell you about the record deals and the sold-out concerts and the truth about my mother that shook the entire Jamaican music industry, I need you to hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Subscribe if you think everyone deserves to have their voice heard. And share the story if you've ever been underestimated by people who thought they knew your worth. But let me start from the beginning, back when I was 17 and believed that keeping quiet was the safest way to survive. I was the kind of girl who tried to make herself invisible. At Kingston High, that wasn't hard to do when you wore the same 3 uniforms rotated throughout the week, when your shoes had holes that you covered with tape, when your lunch was whatever you could afford from the corner shop instead of the fancy meals the other kids brought from home. I'd learned early that drawing attention to yourself when you were different meant inviting pain. I believed that if you worked hard enough, if you were kind enough, if you stayed out of everyone's way, maybe they'd leave you alone. I thought that success meant getting through each day without anyone noticing how your stomach growled during third period or how you did homework by candlelight when the electricity got cut off. I was convinced that dreams were luxuries for people who could afford them, and survival was the only goal that mattered for girls like me. What I didn't know was that Shanice Williams and her crew had been watching me for weeks, planning something that would either destroy me completely or change my life forever. What I couldn't see was that my quiet humming during lunch breaks had caught the attention of Mr. Patterson, the music teacher who'd been searching for something real in a school full of manufactured perfection. And what I never could have imagined was that the song I hummed to comfort myself during the loneliest moments was actually written by someone whose voice had once moved crowds across the Caribbean. Someone whose story had been buried so deep that even I didn't know the truth about my own blood. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning when Shanice approached my desk with that smile she used when she was about to make someone's life miserable. She was everything I wasn't: confident, wealthy, surrounded by friends who hung on her every word. Her father owned half the businesses in New Kingston, and she never let anyone forget it. "Raya," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I have some exciting news for you." I looked up from my textbook, immediately suspicious. Shanice Williams had never spoken to me unless it was to make some cutting remark about my clothes or my accent or the way I kept to myself. "The school's talent day is next week, and we thought it would be amazing if you participated." My stomach dropped. Talent Day was the biggest event of the school year, when students performed for parents, teachers, and local media. It was a showcase for the wealthy kids to display their expensive music lessons and professional coaching. It was not a place for someone like me. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said quietly. "Oh, but we already signed you up." Shanice's friend Kimberly chimed in, barely containing her laughter. "We told them you have this incredible singing voice." Everyone's so excited to hear you perform. The blood drained from my face. You did what? Don't worry, Shanice said, patting my shoulder in a gesture that felt more like a threat than comfort. We picked the perfect song for you. Something that really suits your background. They walked away giggling, leaving me sitting there with the horrible realization that I'd been set up. They wanted to watch me fail in front of the entire school, to confirm every stereotype they held about girls from the ghetto who didn't belong in their world. But here's what Shanice Williams didn't know about me. Here's what none of them understood about the quiet girl who sat in the back of every classroom and never caused trouble. I had been singing since I could talk, humming melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep in my bones. When the lights went out in our tiny house in Trench Town, when my grandmother worked double shifts just to keep food on the table, when the weight of our struggles felt too heavy to bear, I sang. Not because I thought I was good at it, but because it was the only thing that made the pain bearable. And the song they'd chosen for me to perform, the one they thought would be perfect for humiliating the poor Jamaican girl, it was a song I'd been humming my entire life, a melody that lived in my dreams and whispered through my memories. A song I'd never heard on the radio or seen written down anywhere, but somehow knew by heart. What I didn't realize yet was that this wasn't a coincidence. What I couldn't have known was that this moment had been building for 17 years, waiting for the right time to reveal a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and my place in the world. The joke was about to become something else entirely. And Shanice Williams was about to learn that sometimes when you try to break someone, you end up giving them exactly what they need to fly. The week leading up to Talent Day felt endless. Every time I walked through the hallways, I could feel eyes on me, hear whispered conversations that stopped when I got too close. Word had spread that the quiet girl from Trench Town was going to sing, and everyone was waiting for the show. Just don't go, my grandmother Mama Rose said when I told her what happened. She was sitting at our small kitchen table, counting the bills for the third time that week, her weathered hands moving slowly through the stack of overdue notices. Tell them you're sick. Tell them anything. But I couldn't do that. Something inside me, some stubborn pride I'd inherited from generations of women who'd survived worse than high school bullies, wouldn't let me run away. Besides, they'd already announced my name. If I didn't show up, it would just confirm everything they believed about people like us. I have to do it, Mama Rose. If I don't, they'll never stop. She looked up at me with those tired eyes that had seen too much hardship, too much loss. Child, some battles aren't worth fighting. These people, they have money, they have power. What do we have? We have our dignity, I said, repeating words she'd taught me since I was small. Dignity doesn't pay rent, she muttered, but I caught the small smile that crossed her face. You're just like your mother. Stubborn as a mule and twice as proud. My mother. The subject we rarely talked about, the ghost that haunted our small house with her absence. All I knew was that she died when I was 3, that she loved music, and that talking about her made Mama Rose's eyes fill with tears she refused to shed. Tell me about her voice, I said, sitting down across from my grandmother. You always say I sound like her, but you never tell me what that means. Mama Rose's hands stilled on the bills. For a moment, I thought she might actually open up, might share some memory that would help me understand where my love of music came from. Instead, she shook her head and stood up. Your mother had a gift, she said simply. But gifts can be dangerous things, child. They make people notice you, and sometimes being noticed isn't safe. I wanted to push, to demand more answers, but I'd learned over the years that Mama Rose's silences were walls I couldn't break down. Whatever secrets she carried about my mother, she was determined to take them to her grave. The next day at school, I discovered that Shanice's plan was more elaborate than I'd realized. She'd convinced Mr. Patterson, the music teacher, to let her help me prepare for my performance. During lunch, she cornered me in the music room with her usual entourage. We thought you might need some coaching, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I mean, performing in front of hundreds of people is very different from humming to yourself. Kimberly giggled. We don't want you to embarrass yourself. Or the school, added Tiffany, the third member of their little crew. Mr. Patterson was there too, looking uncomfortable but not intervening. He was a good teacher, but he was also new to Kingston High and still learning how to navigate the complex social hierarchies that ruled the school. Let's hear what you've been working on, Shanice said, settling into a chair with the air of someone about to be entertained. I stood there for a moment, feeling trapped. The song they'd chosen was called Rise Up, and when I'd looked it up, I couldn't find it anywhere. No artist, no recording, no sheet music. It was as if the song existed only in my memory, passed down through some invisible thread I couldn't trace. I don't need to practice, I said quietly. I know the song. Oh, we insist, Shanice said. We want to make sure you're really ready. There was something in her tone, something that made me realize this wasn't just about humiliating me on stage. This was about breaking me down beforehand, making sure I was so rattled and self-conscious that I'd fail even more spectacularly. But as I stood there looking at their expectant faces, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was thinking about my mother, about the gift Mama Rose said she'd had. Maybe it was the memory of all the nights I'd sung myself to sleep, finding comfort in melodies that seemed to come from somewhere beyond my own experience. I opened my mouth and began to sing. The first notes came out soft, almost whispered, but they carried a weight that seemed to fill the small music room. The melody was haunting, beautiful, with a rhythm that spoke of struggle and hope intertwined. As I continued, my voice grew stronger, more confident, weaving through the lyrics that talked about rising above pain, about finding strength in the darkest moments. The room went completely silent. I watched Shanice's face change from smug anticipation to confusion to something that looked almost like fear. Kimberly and Tiffany had stopped giggling, their mouths slightly open. Even Mr. Patterson was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. When I finished, the silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Where did you learn to sing like that? Mr. Patterson asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I said honestly. I've always been able to do it. Shanice recovered first, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow in the quiet room. Well, that was interesting. Very authentic. Very urban. The way she said urban made it clear she didn't mean it as a compliment. I think you'll do just fine on talent day, she continued, but something had changed in her demeanor. The cruel confidence was still there, but underneath it, I caught a glimpse of something else. Uncertainty. Maybe even a little fear. As they filed out of the music room, I heard Kimberly whisper to Tiffany, that wasn't what we expected. It doesn't matter, Shanice said, but her voice was tighter than usual. One song doesn't change anything. She's still just a ghetto girl trying to fit in where she doesn't belong. But I could tell she was trying to convince herself as much as her friends. Mr. Patterson lingered after they left, studying me with curious eyes. Riot, that song, where did you say you learned it? I didn't learn it anywhere. It's just always been in my head. He frowned, pulling out his phone and typing something. I've been teaching music for 15 years, and I've never heard anything quite like that. The melody, the structure, even the way you phrase the lyrics, it's sophisticated. Professional level. Maybe I heard it on the radio and forgot. No, he said, shaking his head. This isn't something you'd hear on the radio. This is something original. Something special. He showed me his phone screen. He'd been searching for Rise Up in combination with various Jamaican artists, but nothing was coming up. Raya, I think you might have something really unique here. Have you ever thought about taking music seriously? I mean, really seriously. I almost laughed. Mr. Patterson, I can barely afford my school uniforms. Music lessons aren't exactly in the budget. There are scholarships, programs for talented students. With a voice like yours. With a voice like mine, what? I become the next big thing? I get discovered and become famous. I shook my head. That's not how the world works for people like me. But even as I said it, I felt something stirring inside me. A tiny spark of possibility that I'd been trying to suppress my entire life. Just think about it, Mr. Patterson said. And Raya? Whatever happens on Talent Day, don't let them make you feel small. What you have is rare. That night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of Trench Town outside my window. Sirens in the distance, music from a neighbor's radio, the occasional shout or laugh from people walking by. These were the sounds of my world, the rhythm of a life that most of my classmates would never understand. I thought about Shanice's reaction to my singing, about the way her confidence had wavered for just a moment. I thought about Mr. Patterson's words, about scholarships and possibilities I'd never allowed myself to imagine. But mostly, I thought about my mother. About the gift Mama Rose said she'd had, about the dangers that came with being noticed. I wondered if she'd ever stood on a stage, if she'd ever felt the power of her own voice filling a room with silence. I had no way of knowing that in just a few days, I would discover the truth about my mother's gift. I couldn't imagine that the song I'd been humming my entire life was about to unlock secrets that had been buried for 14 years. And I definitely couldn't have predicted that Shanice Williams' cruel joke was about to become the catalyst for a revelation that would change not just my life, but the entire landscape of Jamaican music history. The first betrayal had already happened. They'd signed me up to fail, expecting me to crumble under pressure and confirm their worst assumptions about who I was and what I was worth. But sometimes betrayal becomes the very thing that sets you free. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up being the ones who show you just how strong you really are. Talent Day was 3 days away, and I was about to discover that some gifts are too powerful to stay hidden forever. The morning of Talent Day arrived with the kind of tropical heat that made your uniform stick to your skin before you even left the house. I stood in front of our cracked mirror, trying to make my second-hand blazer look presentable, when Mama Rose appeared behind me with something I'd never seen before. "Here," she said, holding out a small silver pendant on a thin chain. "This was your mother's." My hands trembled as I took it. The pendant was simple but beautiful, with an intricate pattern that looked almost like sound waves carved into the metal. "Mama Rose, why now?" "You've never." "Because today you're going to need her strength," she said, fastening the chain around my neck. "And because it's time you knew that your mother wasn't just some girl who loved music. She was Melody Blanche." The name hit me like a physical blow. Melody Blanche. I'd heard whispers of that name in the music shops downtown, seen it mentioned in old reggae magazines. A singer who'd appeared briefly in the late 1990s, recorded a few songs that became underground classics, then vanished completely. "That's impossible," I whispered. Melody Blanche was famous. She had record deals. She performed with Bob Marley's Sons. "For 2 years," Mama Rose said, her voice heavy with old pain. 2 years before the music industry chewed her up and spit her out. Before the drugs and the men and the promises that turned to lies destroyed everything beautiful about her. I stared at my grandmother, trying to process this revelation. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I watched that world kill my daughter, and I wasn't going to let it kill my granddaughter too." Music was Melody's gift, but it was also her curse. Every time you hummed those melodies, every time I heard her voice coming out of your mouth, I was terrified. The song I'm singing today, "Rise Up," was the last song she ever wrote. She sang it to you when you were a baby, over and over, like a lullaby. After she died, you kept humming it, even though you were too young to remember the words. I thought if I never talked about it, maybe you'd forget. But I hadn't forgotten. The melody had lived in my bones, in my blood, waiting for this moment. "Mama Rose, there's something else." The kids at school, they didn't just randomly pick this song. Somehow they knew. My grandmother's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone told them about it. Someone who knew about my mother, about the connection. This wasn't just a cruel joke. This was planned." Before she could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Break a leg today. Little songbird. Your mother would be so proud. A friend. I showed the message to Mama Rose, watched her hands shake as she read it. We need to leave, she said suddenly. Right now. You're not going to that school today. What? No, I can't run away now. Everyone's expecting me to perform. Raya, you don't understand. There are people who've been waiting for this moment, people who knew your mother, who've been watching you grow up. If they know about the song, if they know who you really are, then what? What are you so afraid of? Mama Rose sat down heavily on my bed, suddenly looking every one of her 68 years. Your mother didn't just disappear from the music industry, child. She was forced out. There were contracts, debts, people who claimed they owned her voice, her songs, even her name. When she died, I thought it was over. But if they know about you, they'll try to claim me too. Or worse. Your mother wrote songs that exposed things, powerful people, corruption in the music industry. Rise Up wasn't just about personal struggle. It was about fighting back against the system that was destroying young artists. There are people who made sure that song never got recorded, never got released. I felt the pendant warm against my skin, as if my mother's spirit was trying to tell me something. But it's going to be released today, isn't it? When I sing it in front of all those people, when the local media records it. That's exactly what someone wants to happen. The question is why, and what they plan to do about it. My phone rang. Mr. Patterson. Raya, thank God. Listen, something strange is happening. I just got a call from a music producer in Kingston, someone claiming to represent your family's estate. He says you don't have permission to perform that song today, that there are legal issues. What kind of legal issues? Copyright infringement. He's threatening to sue the school if we let you perform. But Raya, I've been doing research all week, and I can't find any record of that song being copyrighted by anyone. It's like it doesn't officially exist. I looked at Mama Rose, saw the fear in her eyes. Mr. Patterson, who is this producer? What was his name? Vincent Morrison. He said he's been managing your mother's musical legacy since her death. Mama Rose grabbed the phone from my hand. Vincent Morrison is a vulture who destroyed my daughter's career and probably killed her too. If he's involved in this, then someone's been planning this for a very long time. Mama Rose, what aren't you telling me? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the bustling streets of Trench Town. Finally, she spoke. Your mother didn't die in an accident, Raya. She was murdered. And the last thing she said to me before she died was that if anything happened to her, I should never let you sing in public. Never let them know what you could do. The room spun around me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my mother's death, was crumbling. But I have to perform today. Don't you see? This is bigger than just me now. If my mother was silenced, if her music was buried, then maybe this is my chance to bring it back. Maybe this is why everything happened the way it did. Or maybe this is exactly what they want. Maybe they've been waiting 17 years for you to grow up, to develop your voice, so they can control you the way they controlled her. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. The car will be there in 10 minutes. Don't disappoint us. Through the window, I could see a black sedan pulling up outside our house. Two men in expensive suits got out, looking completely out of place in our neighborhood. They're here, I whispered. Mama Rose moved faster than I'd seen her move in years, grabbing a small bag from under her bed. Back door. Now. Wait, what's in the bag? Everything your mother left behind. Recordings, sheet music, contracts, evidence. Everything I've been hiding from you, from them, from the world. We slipped out the back door just as the men knocked on the front. I could hear them calling my name, their voices polite but insistent. Where are we going? I asked as we hurried through the narrow alleyways behind our house. To the school. You're going to perform that song, but not the way they expect. You're going to tell the truth about your mother, about what happened to her, about why they've been trying to silence her voice for 14 years. But you just said it was dangerous. It is dangerous. But running away won't make it stop. They know who you are now, they know what you can do. The only way to protect yourself is to make sure the whole world knows too. We caught a bus to Kingston High, my heart pounding with every mile. The bag Mama Rose carried felt like it contained explosives, secrets that could destroy lives and careers. "Tell me about Vincent Morrison," I said as we rode through the city. "He was your mother's manager, her producer, her lover. He promised her the world, then took everything she had. When she tried to leave him, when she tried to take back control of her music, he made sure she couldn't work anywhere in Jamaica. And when she threatened to expose what he'd done to other young artists, he killed her. I could never prove it, but I know. And now he's back and he wants you." The school was buzzing with activity when we arrived. Parents, students, local media, even some representatives from record labels who'd heard rumors about the talent show. The auditorium was packed, and I could see Shanice and her friends in the front row, looking nervous but excited. They had no idea what they'd set in motion. Mr. Patterson found us backstage, his face pale with worry. "Raya, that producer called again. He's here at the school. He's demanding to speak with you before you perform." "Let him demand," Mama Rose said firmly. "My granddaughter has every right to sing her mother's song." "But the legal issues." "There are no legal issues," I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "That song belongs to my family, to my mother's memory, to everyone who's ever been silenced by people with power." I could hear the crowd settling in the auditorium, could feel the weight of expectation and anticipation. In a few minutes, I would walk out on that stage and either fulfill Shanice's cruel expectations or change everything. But first, I had to face Vincent Morrison. I had to look into the eyes of the man who'd destroyed my mother and decide whether I was going to let him destroy me too. The pendant around my neck seemed to pulse with warmth, and I could swear I heard my mother's voice whispering in my ear, "Rise up, baby girl. It's time to rise up." The catastrophe wasn't just that I was about to perform in front of hundreds of people. The catastrophe was that 17 years of secrets were about to explode into the open, and there was no going back from what was about to happen next. Vincent Morrison was exactly what I'd expected and somehow worse. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than our rent for 6 months. He stood in the hallway outside the auditorium like he owned the place, flanked by 2 younger men who looked like they'd stepped out of a music video about corporate villains. "Raya Blanche," he said, his voice smooth as honey with an undertone of steel. "You look just like your mother. Same eyes, same stubborn set to your jaw." "Don't talk about my mother," I said, surprised by the venom in my own voice. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, but I must talk about Melody. After all, I made her career. I discovered her singing in a little club in Spanish Town, turned her into a star. Everything she achieved, she owed to me. Everything she achieved, you stole from her." "Is that what your grandmother told you?" He glanced at Mama Rose with obvious disdain. "Rose always had such a vivid imagination. The truth is, your mother was a troubled young woman who made poor choices. Drugs, alcohol, unstable relationships. I try to help her, but some people can't be saved from themselves." I felt Mama Rose tense beside me, but she stayed silent. There was something in her posture that told me she was waiting, watching, letting him reveal himself. "The song you're planning to perform tonight," Morrison continued, "belongs to my company. Melody signed over all rights to her compositions when she joined my label. That includes Rise Up, even though it was never officially released." "Show me the contract," I said. He pulled out a folder, handed me a document that looked official and intimidating. But as I scanned the pages, something didn't feel right. The dates were wrong. The signatures looked too clean, too perfect. "This is fake," I said. "I beg your pardon?" "This contract is dated 6 months before my mother died, but look at the signature. It's identical to the one from her first contract 3 years earlier. People's handwriting changes over time, especially when they're—" I paused, remembering what Mama Rose had said about the drugs and alcohol. especially when they're struggling. Morrison's smile faltered for just a moment. You're mistaken. No, I'm not. And you know what else? This contract gives you rights to songs she'd already written, but Rise Up was composed after she left your label. I know because she sang it to me as a baby, and I was born 2 years after she broke ties with you. The two men flanking Morrison shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered something in his ear, but he waved them off. Even if that were true, Morrison said, you're still a minor. You can't perform copyrighted material without parental consent, and since your mother is deceased and your father is unknown. Her father isn't unknown. The voice came from behind us. We all turned to see a man I'd never met before, tall and lean with graying dreadlocks and kind eyes that looked familiar. He was holding a guitar case and wearing the kind of clothes that suggested he was a musician. Who are you? Morrison demanded. Asher Campbell, the man said, extending his hand to me. I'm your father, Raya. The world tilted sideways. I stared at this stranger who claimed to be my father, trying to process yet another revelation in a day that had already shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. That's impossible, I whispered. Your mother and I were together for 3 years, Asher said gently. We never married, but I loved her deeply. When she got pregnant, we were planning to start a family, to leave the music industry behind and build something real together. Then where have you been for 17 years? The anger in my voice surprised even me. Asher's face crumpled with pain. Vincent made sure I couldn't find you. After Melody died, he told me you'd been adopted by a family in Canada, that it was what she'd wanted. I spent years searching, hiring investigators, following false leads. It wasn't until last week that I learned the truth. Last week. Mama Rose spoke for the first time, her voice sharp with suspicion. Someone sent me a video of Raya singing in the school music room. The same someone who's been sending anonymous tips to local media about tonight's performance. I felt the pieces clicking together in my mind. You've been orchestrating this whole thing, haven't you? I said to Morrison. You had Shanice sign me up for Talent Day. You made sure my father found out about me. You've been pulling strings to create this exact moment. You're being paranoid, Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, I'm being smart. You want me to perform tonight because you know it'll go viral. A poor girl from the ghetto singing her dead mother's lost song? That's a story that sells records. And once I'm famous, once I'm in the spotlight, you'll swoop in with your fake contracts and your legal threats and somehow end up owning my voice just like you owned hers. Asher stepped closer to me, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. Raya, I know this is a lot to process, but you don't have to face this alone anymore. I'm here now, and I won't let him hurt you the way he hurt your mother. How do I know you're really my father? How do I know you're not just another part of his plan? Asher reached into his guitar case and pulled out a photograph. It showed him and a young woman who looked exactly like me, both of them laughing, her hand resting on a small but visible baby bump. This was taken 3 weeks before you were born, he said. Your mother was so excited, so full of hope. She'd just finished writing Rise Up, said it was going to be her gift to you, a song about overcoming everything that tried to keep you down. I studied the photograph, seeing my own features reflected in both their faces. There was no denying the resemblance, no questioning the love that radiated from the image. If you're my father, then you can give consent for me to perform, I said. Absolutely not, Morrison interjected. Even if he is the biological father, he has no legal standing. He's never been involved in the child's life, never paid support. Because you made sure of that, Asher said, his voice rising. You destroyed every chance I had to be part of her life. The tension in the hallway was becoming unbearable. Students and parents were starting to notice the commotion, and I could see Mr. Patterson approaching with a worried expression. This ends now, I said, my voice cutting through their argument. I'm performing tonight, with or without anyone's permission. That song is my birthright, my mother's legacy, and no one is going to stop me from sharing it with the world. If you perform that song, Morrison said, his mask of civility finally slipping, I will destroy you. I have lawyers, connections, power you can't even imagine. I will make sure you never work in music again, that your family loses everything, that your grandmother ends up on the street. Are you threatening a 17-year-old girl? Asher stepped between Morrison and me, his hands clenched into fists. I'm stating facts. The music industry is not a place for naive little girls who think talent is enough. Your mother learned that lesson the hard way. What did you do to her? I demanded. How did she really die? Morrison's smile returned, cold and predatory. Your mother died because she forgot who was in control. She thought she could walk away from her obligations, thought she could take her voice and her songs and start over somewhere else. But voices like hers, like yours, they belong to people who know how to use them properly. You killed her. I protected my investment. And if you're smart, you'll let me protect you too. Sign with my label, let me manage your career, and you'll have everything your mother never got the chance to enjoy. Fame, fortune, respect. All you have to do is trust me. I looked at this man who had destroyed my mother, who was now trying to manipulate me with the same promises he'd probably made to her. I thought about Shanice and her friends, waiting in the auditorium to watch me fail. I thought about all the people who'd underestimated me, who'd assumed that being poor meant being powerless. I have a better idea, I said. Why don't you stay and watch the show? See what happens when someone refuses to be controlled. Morrison's face darkened. You're making a mistake, girl. A very expensive mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I turned and walked toward the auditorium, feeling my father and grandmother fall into step beside me. Behind us, I could hear Morrison speaking rapidly into his phone, making calls, mobilizing whatever forces he had at his disposal. Raya, Asher said as we reached the backstage area, are you sure about this? He's not bluffing about his power. He can make life very difficult for you. He already has, I said. He's been making life difficult for me since the day I was born. But you know what? I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of hiding. Tonight, I'm going to sing my mother's song, and I'm going to make sure the whole world knows who really wrote it. Through the curtains, I could see the packed auditorium. Shanice was in the front row, checking her phone and whispering to her friends. Local news cameras were set up along the sides. Social media was already buzzing with anticipation. What none of them knew was that they were about to witness more than just a talent show performance. They were about to see the resurrection of Melody Blanche's voice, the exposure of Vincent Morrison's crimes, and the birth of something that couldn't be controlled or contained. The pressure was building from every direction. Morrison's threats, my father's sudden appearance, Mama Rose's fears, the weight of my mother's legacy, and the expectations of hundreds of people who had no idea what they were really about to witness. But as I stood there in the wings, feeling the pendant warm against my skin, I realized that pressure could either crush you or transform you into something stronger. Tonight, I was going to find out which one it would be. The moment I stepped onto that stage, everything changed. The auditorium fell silent in a way that felt almost supernatural. Hundreds of faces stared up at me, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. I could see Shanice in the front row, her phone already recording, that cruel smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she waited for me to humiliate myself. But then I opened my mouth and my mother's voice poured out of me. The first notes of Rise Up filled the space with a power I'd never felt before. It wasn't just my voice anymore. It was something deeper, something that seemed to come from the very foundations of the earth. The melody soared and dipped, carrying lyrics that spoke of struggle and triumph, of refusing to be broken by people who thought they owned you. I watched the audience's faces transform. Shanice's smug expression melted into shock. Parents who'd been checking their phones stopped mid-scroll. Even the news cameras seemed to zoom in closer, as if the operators couldn't believe what they were capturing. But it was the reaction from the back of the auditorium that made my blood run cold. Vincent Morrison was standing there with his phone pressed to his ear, and he was smiling. Not the frustrated anger I'd expected, but genuine satisfaction. Like everything was going exactly according to plan. As I reached the bridge of the song, the most powerful part where my mother's voice had always seemed to break with emotion, I saw him nod to someone in the crowd. A man with a professional camera, not from the local news, started recording with equipment that looked far more sophisticated than anything the school would have. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't about stopping me from performing. This was about capturing it. Morrison didn't want to silence my mother's song. He wanted to own it, to control how it was released, to make sure that when the world heard Melody Blanche's lost masterpiece, it would be through his label, under his terms. The devastation hit me mid-note, but I kept singing. I had to, because now I understood that every person in this auditorium, every camera recording, every phone capturing video, was part of a web that Morrison had been weaving for weeks. He'd orchestrated everything. Shanice signing me up hadn't been her idea. The anonymous tips to media outlets, my father's sudden appearance, even the timing of this performance. Morrison had been pulling strings, manipulating events, making sure that when I finally revealed my gift to the world, he'd be in position to claim it. As the song reached its climax, I saw Mama Rose in the wings, her face pale with horror as she watched the same realization dawn on her. She was holding the bag of my mother's belongings, the evidence she'd brought to expose Morrison's crimes, but now I understood why she looked so terrified. The evidence wouldn't matter if Morrison already had legal claim to my performance. If he could prove that I'd performed copyrighted material without permission, he could seize the recording, claim ownership of any viral videos, and use my own voice against me. But there was something else, something worse that I was only beginning to understand. My father, Asher, was standing next to Morrison now. They were talking quietly, and Asher was nodding, his expression not one of a man fighting for his daughter, but of someone receiving instructions. The final notes of Rise Up hung in the air as the truth crashed over me like a wave. Asher wasn't my father. He was another actor in Morrison's elaborate play. The photograph he'd shown me, the story about searching for me for years, the convenient timing of his appearance. It was all lies, all part of Morrison's plan to gain legal control over my performance. The auditorium erupted in applause, but it sounded distant, muffled, like I was hearing it from underwater. People were on their feet, phones were flashing, and I could already see social media notifications lighting up screens throughout the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a voice over the sound system. Morrison had somehow gotten access to the microphone. "What you've just witnessed is the return of a legend." That song, Rise Up, was written by the late, great Melody Blanche and performed tonight by her daughter, Raya, who will be signing exclusively with Morrison Music Group. The applause continued, but now it felt like a trap closing around me. I looked desperately toward the wings, but Mama Rose was gone. The bag with my mother's evidence was gone. Even Mr. Patterson had disappeared. I was alone on that stage, surrounded by hundreds of people who thought they'd just witnessed a triumph, while I realized I'd just been completely and utterly destroyed. "Raya," Morrison's voice continued over the speakers, "would you like to say a few words about your mother's legacy and your exciting future in music?" I stood there, the microphone in my hand, knowing that whatever I said next would be recorded, analyzed, and potentially used against me. If I denounced Morrison publicly, he could claim I was an unstable minor who needed professional management. If I went along with his narrative, I'd be trapped in the same web that had killed my mother. But then I heard something that changed everything. From somewhere in the back of the auditorium, a voice called out, "That's not Melody Blanche's daughter." The crowd turned, murmuring in confusion. An elderly woman was making her way down the aisle, supported by a younger man I didn't recognize. "That's not Melody's child," the woman repeated, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. Melody Blanche never had children. I should know. I'm her sister. The auditorium exploded into chaos. Morrison's face went white. The man I'd thought was my father started backing toward the exit. And I stood there on stage, holding a microphone, realizing that everything I'd believed about my identity, my family, my entire life, was crumbling around me. Melody Blanche died 14 years ago, the woman continued, now close enough that I could see her face clearly. She looked like the woman in the photograph Asher had shown me, but older, sadder. She died alone, broke, and childless because Vincent Morrison destroyed her career and stole everything she had. "This is ridiculous," Morrison said, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. "Rose Blanche is this girl's grandmother. She's been caring for Melody's daughter since." "Rose Blanche isn't Melody's mother," the woman said. "She's a woman Vincent Morrison paid to raise this child and create a false identity. Melody's real mother, my mother, died when we were teenagers." I felt the microphone slip from my numb fingers. The sound of it hitting the stage echoed through the silent auditorium like a gunshot. "Then who am I?" I whispered, but the words were picked up by the sound system, broadcast to everyone in the room. The woman who claimed to be Melody's sister looked up at me with eyes full of compassion and pain. "I don't know, child. But I know you're not my niece. And I know that whatever Vincent Morrison has told you about your family, about your mother, about your right to sing that song, it's all been lies." The devastation was complete. Not only had Morrison manipulated me into performing exactly as he'd planned, but my entire identity was a fabrication. The woman I'd called grandmother, the mother I'd mourned, the legacy I'd thought I was carrying forward, none of it was real. I was nobody. A girl with a beautiful voice who'd been raised on lies, manipulated into believing she had a right to someone else's story, someone else's pain, someone else's music. The crowd was on their feet now, but not in applause. They were confused, angry, demanding answers. Phones were recording everything, capturing my humiliation and broadcasting it to the world. Morrison was shouting something about legal action and false accusations, but his words were drowned out by the chaos. Security guards were moving through the crowd, trying to restore order. And I stood there on that stage, completely alone, realizing that the joke Shanice had planned was nothing compared to the elaborate deception that had shaped my entire life. The girl who thought she was rising up to claim her mother's legacy had just discovered she was falling into a trap that had been 17 years in the making. But as I stood there in the wreckage of everything I'd believed about myself, I felt something stirring inside me. Something that had nothing to do with Melody Blanche or Vincent Morrison or the lies that had defined my existence. It was my voice, my real voice. And for the first time in my life, I was going to use it to tell my own truth, whatever that might be. The devastation was complete, but sometimes you have to lose everything you think you are before you can discover who you really are. And I was about to find out exactly who Raya Blanche really was. The aftermath of that night was worse than anything I could have imagined. Within hours, videos of my performance and the chaos that followed were everywhere. Social media exploded with theories, accusations, and cruel memes. Fake daughter scams audience with dead singer song was trending on Twitter. The girl who stole a legacy became a hashtag that followed me everywhere. But the online humiliation was nothing compared to what happened when I got home. The woman I'd called Mama Rose for 17 years was sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by packed boxes. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, broken in a way that made my chest ache despite everything. "It's true, isn't it?" I said, standing in the doorway. "Everything that woman said. You're not my grandmother." Rose looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "I loved you like you were my own blood, Raya. That was never a lie. But everything else was." She nodded slowly. "Vincent Morrison came to me 18 years ago. I was working as a nanny for wealthy families, barely making enough to survive. He offered me more money than I'd ever seen to take care of a baby, to raise her as if she were Melody Blanche's daughter. Whose baby was I really? I don't know. Morrison never told me. He just said you were the child of someone who couldn't care for you, and that giving you Melody's identity would protect you somehow. I sank into the chair across from her, feeling like my bones had turned to water. Protect me from what? I thought it was from poverty, from the kind of life I'd grown up with. Morrison paid for this house, for your schooling, for everything we needed. All I had to do was tell you stories about your mother, teach you to love music, and make sure you developed your voice. You knew I could sing before I ever opened my mouth, didn't you? Rose's silence was answer enough. He's been planning this since I was a baby. 17 years of grooming me, shaping me, waiting for the right moment to reveal his discovery to the world. I thought I was giving you a better life, Rose whispered. I thought the lies were protecting you. From what? Who are my real parents? Why did Morrison want me specifically? I don't know, child. I swear I don't know. But even as she said it, I could see in her eyes that there were still secrets, still pieces of the truth she was holding back. My phone had been ringing constantly since we got home. Reporters, bloggers, people claiming to be talent scouts or lawyers or long-lost relatives. I'd stopped answering after the 15th call, but the voicemails kept coming. Raya, this is Channel 7 News. We'd like to give you a chance to tell your side of the story. Miss Blanche, this is Morrison Music Group's legal department. We need to discuss the unauthorized use of copyrighted material. Girl, you need to call me back. I got information about your real family that's gonna blow your mind. Each message felt like another weight added to my chest, making it harder to breathe. The worst part was that I couldn't even be angry at Rose. Looking at her now, seeing how broken she was, I realized she'd been as much a victim of Morrison's manipulation as I had been. She'd spent 17 years loving a child she'd been paid to lie to, and now she was losing everything too. Where will you go? I asked, noticing the packed boxes. Morrison's people came by this afternoon. The house was never really ours. They're taking it back, along with everything else they provided over the years. What about me? Where am I supposed to go? Rose's face crumpled. I don't know, baby. I don't have any legal right to you. I'm not your guardian, not your family. Morrison could probably have you placed in foster care or... She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. Morrison could do whatever he wanted with me now. I was a minor with no legal family, no resources, no protection. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car will be there in 1 hour. Pack light. Time to discuss your future. VM. I showed the message to Rose, watched her face go pale. You don't have to go with him, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Don't I? What choice do I have? I'm 17, I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. And he owns the only thing I'm good at. Your voice doesn't belong to him, doesn't it? He created the identity that gave me the confidence to use it. He orchestrated the moment that revealed it to the world. He probably even chose me as a baby because he knew I had potential. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That's it, isn't it? That's why he wanted me specifically. He didn't just pick any baby to raise as Melody's daughter. He picked me because I already had the gift. Rose's silence confirmed my suspicion. Who were my real parents, Rose? Were they musicians? Did Morrison steal me from another family he destroyed? I can't tell you what I don't know. Can't or won't. Before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. Through the window, I could see the same black sedan that had been outside our house that morning, along with 2 police cars. Miss Blanche. A uniformed officer called through the door. We need to speak with you about your living situation. Rose squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, remember that I loved you. That was real, even if nothing else was. I opened the door to find the officer standing next to a woman in a business suit who looked like she'd stepped out of a government handbook. Raya Blanche? I'm Mrs. Ashley from Child Protective Services. We need to discuss your guardianship situation. There's no situation to discuss. came a familiar voice from behind them. Vincent Morrison stepped into view, carrying a folder thick with documents. "Miss Blanche will be coming with me. I have all the necessary paperwork." "On what authority?" Mrs. Ashley asked. Morrison handed her the folder. "Emergency guardianship, granted this afternoon by family court. As Miss Blanche's manager and the executor of her mother's estate, I'm the most qualified person to care for her during this difficult transition." I watched Mrs. Ashley flip through the documents, her expression growing more confused with each page. "These papers show that you've been managing Miss Blanche's career since she was a child, but there's no record of her ever having a professional career. That's because we've been preparing for her debut, which happened tonight. Miss Blanche is now a valuable musical property who requires professional management and protection. She's a 17-year-old girl, not a property." Morrison's smile was cold. "In the music industry, Mrs. Ashley, talented minors are both. And Miss Blanche is extraordinarily talented." I felt like I was watching my life being negotiated by strangers, my future decided by people who saw me as either a problem to be solved or an asset to be managed. "I want to stay with Rose," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's not possible," Morrison said. "Mrs. Williams has no legal standing, and frankly, her deception regarding your identity makes her an unfit guardian. She's the only family I've ever known. She's a woman I paid to lie to you for 17 years. It's time you learn the difference between family and employees." The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. He was stripping away not just my identity, but the only love I'd ever known, reducing it to a business transaction. "What if I refuse to go with you? Then you'll go into the foster system, where you'll have no resources, no support, and no way to develop your musical career. Is that really what you want?" Mrs. Ashley looked uncomfortable with the whole situation, but the paperwork seemed to be in order. "Miss Blanche, do you have any other family members who could take custody?" I thought about the woman who'd claimed to be Melody's sister, but I didn't even know her name. I thought about Asher, the man who'd pretended to be my father, but he'd disappeared the moment his deception was exposed. "No," I said. "I don't have anyone." "Then it's settled," Morrison said. "Raya, get your things. We have a lot to discuss about your future." As I packed my few belongings into a small suitcase, I felt like I was attending my own funeral. Everything that had made me who I was, everything I'd believed about myself, was being left behind in this small house in Trench Town. Rose hugged me goodbye, whispering apologies and promises that we'd find each other again somehow. But we both knew that once Morrison took me, I'd be entering a world where she couldn't follow, couldn't protect me, couldn't even contact me. "Remember who you really are," she whispered in my ear. "Not the story they told you, not the identity they created, but who you are in your heart. That's the only truth that matters." But as I walked toward Morrison's car, I realized I had no idea who I really was. The girl named Raya Blanche was a fiction. The daughter of Melody Blanche was a lie. The granddaughter of Rose Williams was a performance. I was nobody, and now I belonged to a man who saw me as nothing more than a voice to be exploited and a story to be sold. The descent was complete. I'd lost my home, my family, my identity, and my freedom. All I had left was my voice, and even that was about to become someone else's property. As the car pulled away from the only home I'd ever known, I watched Rose standing in the doorway, growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared entirely. I was alone in the world, completely at the mercy of a man who'd already destroyed one young singer's life. And I was about to discover that the darkest part of my journey was just beginning. Morrison's mansion in the hills above Kingston was everything I'd expected, and nothing I was prepared for. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls lined with gold records and photographs of him with every major reggae star of the past 30 years. It was a monument to success built on other people's dreams. "Welcome to your new home," he said as we walked through rooms that felt more like a museum than a place where people lived. You'll have everything you need here. Private tutors, vocal coaches, the best equipment money can buy. What about school? My friends. Morrison laughed. Raya, you're about to become one of the biggest stars in Caribbean music. You don't need high school friends. You need to focus on your career. He led me to a bedroom that was larger than the entire house I'd shared with Rose. Everything was white and gold, pristine and cold. It felt like a beautiful prison cell. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we start working on your debut album. We have a lot of ground to cover. After he left, I sat on the edge of the massive bed and tried to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, I'd been a poor girl from Trench Town preparing for a school talent show. Now I was a homeless orphan trapped in a mansion with a man who'd built his empire on lies and manipulation. My phone had been buzzing constantly, but when I checked it, I realized Morrison had somehow changed my number. All the messages from reporters, from classmates, even from Rose, were gone. I was completely cut off from the outside world. I tried calling Rose's number, but it went straight to a disconnected message. When I attempted to access my social media accounts, I found they'd been suspended, pending identity verification. Even my email had been deactivated. Morrison had erased me as efficiently as he'd created me. The next morning, I woke up to find a team of people in the mansion's music studio. Producers, songwriters, image consultants, all of them buzzing with excitement about the Melody Blanche project. We're thinking of calling the album Rising Up, one of the producers said. Play into the whole legacy angle, you know? The daughter carrying on her mother's work. But I'm not her daughter, I said. The room went quiet. Morrison stepped forward, his expression patient but firm. Raya, we've discussed this. The truth is complicated, and the public doesn't need to be confused by complicated truths. You are Melody Blanche's spiritual daughter, her musical heir. That's what matters. That's a lie. It's marketing. And in this business, marketing is truth. For the next 3 weeks, they tried to break me down and rebuild me in their image. Vocal coaches who criticized everything about my natural style. Songwriters who wanted me to sing generic pop songs instead of the reggae-influenced music that felt authentic to me. Image consultants who dressed me in clothes that made me look like a manufactured teen star instead of the girl from Trench Town I really was. But the worst part was the isolation. Morrison had made sure I had no contact with the outside world, no way to reach Rose or anyone else who might help me. I was completely dependent on him for everything. Food, shelter, even basic human contact. You're fighting this too hard, he said one evening after I'd refused to record yet another song that felt like a betrayal of everything I believed in. Your mother fought me too, in the beginning. Look how that ended. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. The music industry is not a democracy, Raya. It's a kingdom, and I'm the king. You can either be a princess in my court, or you can be nothing at all. That night, I lay in my golden prison and thought about giving up. Maybe Morrison was right. Maybe this was the only way someone like me could ever make it in the music world. Maybe fighting him was just naive idealism that would get me nowhere. But then I remembered something Rose had said. Remember who you really are, not the story they told you, but who you are in your heart. The problem was, I still didn't know who I really was. But I was starting to understand who I wasn't. I wasn't Melody Blanche's daughter. I wasn't Morrison's creation. I wasn't a product to be manufactured and sold. I was a girl with a voice, and that voice belonged to me. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Morrison's housekeeper, an elderly woman named Miss Pearl, had been watching me struggle for weeks. One evening, she knocked on my bedroom door. Child, you look like you carrying the weight of the world. I feel like I am. Miss Pearl sat down beside me on the bed. You know, I worked for Mr. Morrison for 20 years. I seen a lot of young people come through this house. Most of them leave broken. Why are you telling me this? Because you're different. You got something in you that can't be manufactured or controlled. But you got to decide if you're gonna let him kill it or if you're gonna fight for it. She handed me a small piece of paper with a phone number written on it. What's this? Friend of mine works at the radio station downtown. She been asking questions about you, about what really happened that night at your school. She think there's more to your story than what Mr. Morrison been telling people. I stared at the number, feeling hope stir in my chest for the first time in weeks. If I call her, Morrison will find out. Maybe. But if you don't call her, you gonna spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. That night, I snuck down to Morrison's office and used his landline to call the number Miss Pearl had given me. A woman answered on the second ring. Irie FM, this is Donna. Miss Pearl gave me your number. She said you've been asking questions about me. There was a pause. Raya? Girl, where are you? People been looking for you everywhere. I'm at Morrison's house. He has legal custody of me. Legal custody based on forged documents. Honey, that man don't have no right to keep you prisoner. What do you mean? I've been doing some digging since that night at your school. The emergency guardianship papers he filed? They based on false information. He claimed to be your mother's manager and the executor of her estate, but Melody Blanche never had a manager named Vincent Morrison. She was represented by a completely different agency. My heart started racing. Are you sure? I got the documentation right here. Plus, I found something else. The woman who claimed to be Melody's sister that night? She's been trying to reach you. She got information about who you really are. Can you help me get out of here? Child, I can do better than that. I can help you tell your real story to the world. But you got to be brave enough to walk away from everything Morrison's offering you. I looked around Morrison's opulent office at the gold records and the photographs of him with famous artists. He was offering me wealth, fame, success. All I had to do was surrender my voice, my identity, my soul. What if I can't make it without him? What if I'm nobody without the Melody Blanche story? Then you find out who you really are and you build something real from that. It might not be easy, but it'll be yours. I thought about Rose, about the love she'd given me even though it was built on lies. I thought about my voice, about the way it felt when I sang from my heart instead of from a script. I thought about all the young artists Morrison had probably destroyed over the years, and all the ones he would destroy in the future if someone didn't stop him. How do I get out? You walk out the front door, child. You 17 years old, not a prisoner. And when you do, you come straight to the radio station. We gonna tell your story the right way. The choice was impossible because both options terrified me. Stay with Morrison and lose myself completely, or leave and face the world with nothing but my voice and the truth. But as I sat there in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his success built on other people's dreams, I realized that some choices aren't really choices at all. They're just moments when you finally find the courage to do what you've known all along you had to do. I was going to walk out that door. I was going to reclaim my voice. And I was going to discover who Raya really was, even if it meant losing everything I thought I wanted. The impossible choice was about to become the only choice that mattered. I walked out of Morrison's mansion at dawn, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the pendant that had belonged to whoever my mother really was. Miss Pearl had left the front gate unlocked and slipped me bus fare, whispering, "Go find your truth, child," as I passed her in the kitchen. The radio station was in downtown Kingston, a small building wedged between a patty shop and a cell phone repair store. Nothing like the gleaming studios Morrison had shown me, but when I walked through the door, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Donna was exactly what I'd expected from her voice. Middle-aged, no-nonsense, with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd spent years fighting for the underdog. "You look like you've been through hell," she said, wrapping me in a hug that felt like coming home. "I feel like it too." "Well, we about to change that. But first, there's someone here who's been waiting to meet you." She led me into the main studio, where a woman was sitting at the console. The same woman who'd stood up in the auditorium that night, who'd claimed to be Melody's sister. "Raya," the woman said, standing up. "My name is Patricia Sinclair, and I have some things to tell you that are going to change everything you think you know about yourself." I sat down across from her, my heart pounding. Are you really Melody's sister? I am. And Melody really never had children. But that doesn't mean you don't have a connection to our family. Patricia pulled out a folder thick with documents and photographs. 3 weeks ago, after that night at your school, I started investigating. I wanted to know who you were, why Vincent Morrison was using my sister's name to manipulate you. She spread the photographs across the table. These are pictures of my family going back 3 generations. Look at them carefully. I studied the images, seeing faces that looked familiar but couldn't place. Then Patricia handed me a photograph that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a young woman who looked exactly like me, standing next to a man with kind eyes and a guitar. They were both smiling, both radiating the kind of happiness that comes from being deeply in love. That's my cousin Marley and her husband David, Patricia said. This picture was taken about 18 years ago, just before they left Jamaica. Left for where? Canada. Marley was pregnant, and they wanted to start fresh somewhere safe. David was a musician, but he'd gotten mixed up with some dangerous people in the music industry. People who wanted to control his career, his music, his life. I stared at the photograph, seeing my own features reflected in both their faces. Are you saying? I'm saying that Marley and David were your parents. Real parents, not the fiction Morrison created. The room spun around me. But why would Morrison take me? Why create this whole elaborate lie? Patricia's expression darkened. Because David wrote songs that could have destroyed Morrison's empire. Songs about corruption in the music industry, about how young artists were being exploited and manipulated. Morrison needed those songs to disappear, and he needed David to disappear too. What happened to them? Their plane crashed on the way to Toronto. Both of them died, but you survived. You were just 6 months old. I felt like I was drowning in revelations. So Morrison took me from the crash site? Not exactly. You were in the hospital for weeks, and there was confusion about your identity. Morrison used his connections to have you declared an orphan, then arranged for Rose to take you. But he didn't just want to hide you, Raya. He wanted to use you. Use me how? Patricia pulled out another document. This is David's will. He left everything to his daughter, including the rights to all his songs. Songs that Morrison had been trying to get his hands on for years. But I was just a baby. How could I own anything? Because Morrison planned to wait. He was going to raise you, shape you, and then when you came of age, he was going to convince you to sign over your inheritance. All of your father's music, all of his royalties, everything would become Morrison's property. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. That's why he created the Melody Blanche story. He needed me to believe I had a musical legacy, so I'd be eager to pursue a career he could control. Exactly. And when you turned 18, he was going to present you with contracts that would sign away everything your real parents left you. Donna had been recording our conversation, and now she leaned forward. Raya, this story is bigger than just you. If Morrison has been doing this to other families, other artists. He has, I said, thinking about all the gold records in his office, all the photographs with artists who'd probably been manipulated and exploited. He told me my mother fought him too, in the beginning. He said look how that ended. Melody did fight him, Patricia confirmed. She tried to expose what he was doing to young artists. That's why he destroyed her career, why he made sure she could never work again. Did he kill her too? Patricia's silence was answer enough. I stood up, pacing the small studio as the full scope of Morrison's crimes became clear. He wasn't just a manipulative manager. He was a predator who destroyed families, stole legacies, and murdered anyone who threatened his empire. We have to stop him, I said. We will, Donna said. But first, we need to get your story out there. The real story. What about the legal issues? Morrison has custody of me, he has contracts. All based on fraudulent information, Patricia said. I've been working with a lawyer who specializes in music industry fraud. Once we expose the truth about your identity, all of Morrison's claims become invalid. But what if he tries to hurt me? What if he does to me what he did to my parents, to Melody? That's why we're doing this publicly, Donna explained. Once your story is out there, once people know the truth, Morrison can't make you disappear without everyone knowing he's responsible. I thought about my real parents, about the songs my father had written that Morrison had been trying to steal for 18 years. I thought about Melody, about all the other artists whose voices had been silenced. What do I need to do? Tell your story, Donna said, adjusting the microphone. All of it. The lies Morrison told you, the way he manipulated your entire life, the truth about who you really are. And then sing. Sing what? Patricia smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Sing your father's songs. The ones Morrison never got his hands on, the ones that expose everything he's done. She handed me a folder of sheet music. Marley gave these to me before she left Jamaica, asked me to keep them safe. I never understood why until now. I looked at the songs my real father had written, songs about corruption and exploitation, about fighting back against people who tried to own your voice. Songs that Morrison had killed for. Are you ready? Donna asked, her finger hovering over the broadcast button. I thought about Rose, who'd loved me even though she'd been paid to lie to me. I thought about my real parents, who died trying to protect their music and their daughter. I thought about Melody, whose voice had been silenced, but whose story could finally be told. I'm ready. Donna hit the button, and suddenly we were live on the air, broadcasting to all of Jamaica and beyond. Good morning, this is Irie FM, and I'm here with a young woman whose story is about to shake the foundations of the music industry. Raya, tell us who you really are. I leaned into the microphone, feeling my real voice emerge for the first time in my life. My name is Raya Campbell, and I'm the daughter of Marley and David Campbell. For 17 years, I've been living a lie created by Vincent Morrison, a man who murdered my parents and stole my inheritance. But today, I'm taking back my voice, my story, and my father's legacy. And then I began to sing. Not Melody's song, not Morrison's manufactured pop, but my father's music. Songs that spoke truth to power, that exposed corruption, that refused to be silenced. As my voice filled the airwaves, I could feel something shifting in the world. Phones were ringing at the station, social media was exploding, and somewhere in his mansion, Vincent Morrison was realizing that his carefully constructed empire was about to come crashing down. The revelation was complete. The truth was finally out. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly who I was supposed to be. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour of my broadcast, the radio station's phone lines were jammed. Social media exploded with hashtag Justice for Raya and hashtag Expose Vincent Morrison trending across the Caribbean and beyond. Videos of my performance from that night at Kingston High were being shared with new context, and people were finally understanding what they'd really witnessed. But the most important call came from Rose. Baby girl, her voice cracked through the phone, I heard you on the radio. I'm so proud of you for telling the truth. Rose, where are you? Morrison said he took the house. I'm staying with my sister in Spanish Town. And child, I got something to tell you. After you left, I went through all the papers Morrison gave me over the years. I found documents about your real parents, about the plane crash. I've been carrying this guilt for 17 years, knowing I was part of keeping you from your true family. You loved me when no one else would. That's not something to feel guilty about. There's more. I found bank records showing that Morrison been putting money aside in your name, money that was supposed to be from your father's royalties. It's a lot of money, Raya. Enough to take care of you for life. Patricia, who'd been listening to our conversation, leaned forward. That proves Morrison knew exactly who you were from the beginning. He's been managing your inheritance while lying to you about your identity. Within hours, Morrison's world began to collapse. The lawyer Patricia had been working with filed emergency injunctions freezing all of Morrison's assets pending investigation. Other artists who'd been exploited by him started coming forward with their own stories. The police launched a formal investigation into the deaths of my parents and Melody Blanche. But Morrison wasn't going down without a fight. That evening, as I sat in the radio station giving interviews to media outlets from around the world, he showed up with a team of lawyers and security guards. "This broadcast is defamatory," he announced, storming into the studio. "Miss Blanche is a confused minor who's been manipulated by people trying to destroy my reputation." "My name is Raya Campbell," I said, standing up to face him. "And the only person who's been manipulating me is you. You have no proof of these ridiculous allegations." Patricia stood up, holding a thick folder. "Actually, we have plenty of proof. Bank records, forged documents, witness statements from other artists you've exploited. And we have this." She pulled out a recording device. "Melody Blanche made this before she died. She knew you were going to kill her, so she recorded everything. Every threat, every detail of how you destroyed her career, every crime you committed." Morrison's face went white. "That's impossible. I destroyed all of Melody's recordings. You destroyed the ones you knew about. But Melody was smarter than you gave her credit for. She hid copies with people she trusted, people who've been waiting 17 years for the right moment to expose you." The recording was devastating. Melody's voice, clear and strong, detailing years of abuse, manipulation, and threats. She named other artists Morrison had destroyed, other families he'd torn apart, other crimes he'd committed in his quest for power and control. "You killed my parents," I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "You stole my childhood, my identity, my family. You tried to steal my voice too." "I made you," Morrison snarled, his polished facade finally cracking completely. "Without me, you'd be nothing. Just another poor girl from the ghetto with a pretty voice and no future. Without you, I'd have grown up knowing who I really was. I'd have had my parents, my real family, my father's music. You didn't make me, Vincent. You tried to break me." The police arrived then, led by Detective Williams, who'd been investigating Morrison for years without enough evidence to make charges stick. Now, with Melody's recording and all the documentation Patricia had gathered, they finally had what they needed. "Vincent Morrison, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy in the deaths of David and Marley Campbell." As they led him away in handcuffs, Morrison looked back at me one last time. "You think this is over? You think exposing me changes anything? There are a dozen more like me in this industry. They'll chew you up and spit you out just like they did your parents." "Maybe," I said. "But they'll have to do it in the light now, not in the shadows. And I won't be facing them alone." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media interviews, and revelations. Morrison's empire crumbled as more victims came forward and more evidence emerged. He was eventually sentenced to life in prison for multiple counts of murder, fraud, and racketeering. The money he'd been hiding from my father's royalties was returned to me, along with the rights to all of David Campbell's music. It was enough to ensure I'd never have to worry about financial security again. But more importantly, I finally had my real family back. Patricia introduced me to cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who'd been searching for me for years. They shared stories about my parents, showed me photographs and videos I'd never seen, helped me understand where my musical gift really came from. "Your father would be so proud," Patricia said as we sat in her living room, surrounded by family I was still getting to know. "He always said music should be about truth, about fighting for people who don't have a voice." What about my career? Everyone's expecting me to become this big star now. What do you want to do? I thought about Morrison's mansion, about the manufactured pop songs and the image consultants. I thought about the gold records on his wall, built on other people's dreams and pain. I want to sing my father's songs. I want to make sure his message gets heard. And I want to help other young artists avoid what happened to me. 6 months later, I released my debut album, Rising Up, The David Campbell Sessions. It featured my father's original songs, performed with the raw honesty he'd intended, along with new songs I'd written about my journey from deception to truth. The album went platinum in Jamaica and topped reggae charts worldwide. But more importantly, it sparked conversations about exploitation in the music industry and led to new protections for young artists. I used part of my inheritance to establish the Campbell Foundation, providing legal support and resources for musicians being exploited by predatory managers and labels. Rose became the foundation's first director, finally able to use her experience to help other families avoid what we'd been through. You know what the best part is? Rose said as we sat in our new office, reviewing applications from artists who needed help. You found your way back to who you were always meant to be. We both did, I said, squeezing her hand. You're still my family, Rose. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. The Foundation's first major case was helping a young singer named Asher escape a contract with one of Morrison's former associates. As I watched him perform his own songs, his own truth, I realized that my story wasn't really about revenge or justice. It was about the power of finding your real voice and using it to lift others up. Today, as I write this, I'm 25 years old. I've released 4 albums, won 2 Grammys, and helped dozens of young artists reclaim their voices from people who tried to steal them. The Campbell Foundation has become a major force in music industry reform. But the thing I'm most proud of is that when I look in the mirror, I see Raya Campbell. Not the manufactured identity Vincent Morrison created, not the lies he built my childhood on, but the real me. The daughter of David and Marley Campbell, the granddaughter of love if not blood, the voice that refused to be silenced. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about the 17 years that were stolen from me. The truth is, I'm grateful. Not for the pain, not for the lies, but for the strength I found in surviving them. Every young artist I help, every voice that gets heard because of our work, every family that stays together because we expose the truth, makes those lost years worth something. And you know what? I still sing Rise Up sometimes, the song that started it all. Not because it was written by Melody Blanche, but because it speaks to something universal about refusing to be broken by people who think they own you. Hey, if you've made it this far in my story, I want you to know something. Whatever voice you have, whatever truth you're carrying, whatever dream someone told you was impossible, it belongs to you. Don't let anyone steal it, silence it, or convince you it's not worth sharing. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of truth. Subscribe if you think everyone deserves to know their real story. And share this if you've ever felt like you were living someone else's life. Because here's what I learned: you can't build something real on a foundation of lies. But when you find your truth, when you claim your real voice, you can change not just your own world, but the world around you. The girl who was supposed to be a joke became a voice for justice. The manufactured identity became authentic power. And the lie that was meant to destroy me became the truth that set me free. That's the real magic of music, of storytelling, of refusing to give up on who you really are. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up being the ones who show you just how unbreakable you really are. And sometimes, just sometimes, the voice they tried to silence becomes the one that changes everything. Keep rising up, beautiful people. Your voice matters more than you know.